14 minutes. That's all it took for three of China's most heavily guarded missile bases to vanish from the map. The strike stunned the world. Hardened silos ripped open, radar stations silenced, and a railway artery so vital to Beijing's arsenal left twisted in smoke. By the time anyone understood what was happening, the damage was already irreversible. The operation was called Iron Torch, a coalition-led assault designed to break the illusion of Chinese invulnerability. Billions in military assets were neutralized before Beijing could even scramble a response. For the first time in decades, the United States had acted not with warnings or sanctions, but with firepower. This wasn't just another strike. It was a demonstration that distance no longer protects, and that in modern warfare, time itself can be the deadliest weapon. But why did Washington take this risk? And how was such a devastating attack pulled off in under a quarter of an hour? At 7 a.m. Washington time, the White House went silent. Behind closed doors, the President of the United States prepared to address a world already in shock. Flanked by the Vice President and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he stood before cameras, knowing every word would echo across continents. The message was blunt: America would not sit idle while Chinese warheads threatened its homeland. If Beijing pointed a nuclear weapon westward, the only warning it would ever receive was the crater left behind. The address lasted only minutes, but its impact was immediate. Screens lit up across New York, Tokyo, London, and Canberra, with satellite imagery showing three massive scars in the deserts of Xinjiang, where missile bases had once stood. Analysts quickly confirmed the targets had been linked to DF-41 intercontinental ballistic missiles, each capable of carrying multiple nuclear warheads. In one strike, Washington had erased a decade of Chinese buildup and, just as importantly, shattered the perception that Beijing's strategic assets were untouchable. Allies breathed a sigh of relief. Adversaries recalculated, and within hours, capitals across the globe were scrambling emergency meetings. For the United States, this was more than a military victory. It was the unveiling of a doctrine swift, preemptive, and ruthless in its execution. A doctrine that left no room for hesitation. By mid-morning in Europe, the strike was no longer just an American story. At NATO headquarters in Brussels, ambassadors from 31 nations were rushed into an emergency session. The air in the chamber was tense, heavy with the realization that the rules of global stability had just been rewritten. Intelligence briefings delivered to the Council carried an unsettling detail. Chinese surveillance drones, equipped with stealth coatings and capable of flying for more than a full day without refueling, had been tracked circling just outside NATO's perimeter. One had been detected a mere 40 kilometers from a sensitive monitoring station in Eastern Europe, a site already hardened against Russian intrusion. The implication was chilling. China was not only projecting power in the Pacific, but now pressing against the very edges of Europe. NATO's Secretary General didn't mince words. Borders could no longer be trusted as shields. The alliance, he warned, was facing pressure from multiple directions at once. Representatives from Poland, Romania, and the Baltic states pressed urgently for reinforcements. At the same time, reports poured in of Chinese naval expansion near Pakistan and growing joint drills with Russia in the South China Sea. It looked less like coincidence and more like a strategy testing the alliance's ability to stay unified under strain. Across the Pacific, the ripple effects were immediate. In Tokyo, sirens blared for the first time in years. Seoul ordered its radar operators onto triple rotations. Canberra quietly raised the alert level across its naval bases. To them, the strike in Xinjiang wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. By the time NATO's meeting adjourned, the conclusion was unavoidable. The red lines of the 21st century had already been crossed. And now, every ally would have to decide how far they were willing to go to enforce them. While NATO debated behind closed doors, Taiwan had no such luxury. By mid-afternoon in Taipei, the Ministry of Defense staged a press conference unlike anything seen in years. Cameras snapped, reporters pushed forward, and the world leaned in as Taiwan's defense minister stood shoulder to shoulder with the nation's Air Force commander. Their message was raw and unapologetic. Taiwan, they declared, would no longer fight from the shadows. Every drone launched, every jet scrambled, every missile fired was proof that the island would never submit, and this time they had evidence to back their words. On a massive screen behind them, grainy images appeared. 11 Chinese J-20 stealth fighters lying in charred fragments on a coastal airstrip, 2 DF-26 missile launchers reduced to smoldering wrecks, and a rail line gouged open by precision drone strikes. Each image bore a timestamp, each strike verified. What stunned analysts wasn't just the destruction, it was the scale. In 72 hours, Taiwan's drone fleet had flown more than 600 sorties, hammering targets once thought unreachable. Cheap, disposable drones, costing under $50,000, had inflicted damage worth billions, flipping the logic of warfare on its head. Inside Taiwan's factories, reporters were shown production lines running at full tilt. Thousands of technicians worked in shifts around the clock, assembling drones at a pace meant to double the fleet within weeks. For a nation of just 23 million people, the determination was staggering. That night, Liberty Square overflowed with crowds. Veterans of past conflicts stood beside students and factory workers, waving both Taiwanese and American flags. Their chant, "Freedom is defended, never given," echoed across live broadcasts and into the heart of Beijing, where silence and unease replaced the old air of confidence. By evening, the battlefield had shifted from deserts and coastlines to the screens of billions. What unfolded online spread faster than any missile could fly. Drone footage of Chinese silos erupting in firestorms raced across YouTube, Telegram, and TikTok. One clip showing a DF-41 missile silo ripped open like a crushed can hit 25 million views within hours. Another, capturing a convoy of fuel trucks exploding in a chain of fireballs along a railway line, was replayed tens of millions of times before Beijing's censors even reacted. Satellite images soon followed 3 vast craters where military complexes had once stood, their outlines so large they were visible from space. Independent accounts verified what official statements in Beijing were desperately denying. Online, hashtags surged, #Iron Torch, #Crater Doctrine, #China Exposed. In less than a day, they racked up more than 100 million mentions worldwide. Comment sections turned into digital battlegrounds, where disbelief, triumph, and fear clashed in real time. Inside China, censorship worked overtime. State media claimed the losses were minimal, dismissing the operation as a reckless stunt. But the truth leaked anyway. Ambulances lined highways. Smoke plumes towered thousands of feet into the air. Families quietly grieved while VPN traffic inside the country spiked by more than 400%. For military analysts, the numbers told a story louder than any video. Less than $200 million worth of Allied drones and precision munitions had destroyed assets worth more than $3 billion. The traditional balance between defense and offense had been overturned overnight. And as the world scrolled, liked, and shared, one realization became clear. In the 21st century, wars are not only fought with weapons, they are decided by the images burned into global perception. By midnight GMT, the dust had barely settled over Xinjiang, yet the consequences were already global. Operation Iron Torch was no longer seen as a single strike. It was being studied, dissected, and framed as a blueprint for 21st century warfare. In less than a quarter of an hour, 3 hardened missile bases had been erased. Launchers capable of carrying over 100 nuclear warheads had been neutralized before they could even be readied. Long-range radar systems had gone dark, satellite uplinks cut, and command chains paralyzed. For Beijing, the silence that followed was more humiliating than any counterstrike could have been. Washington understood what it had demonstrated. Distance no longer shielded adversaries. Thousands of kilometers away, assets once considered unreachable could be reduced to rubble before their operators even knew they were under attack. Across the Pacific, allies responded with urgency. In Tokyo, the Japanese Prime Minister convened an emergency cabinet meeting and pledged an additional $14 billion in defense spending. In Seoul, South Korea announced it would double its drone production capacity by year's end. In Canberra, Australia committed to hosting a permanent fleet of advanced American bombers, ensuring the strike capability extended across the Indo-Pacific. NATO, too, recognized the message. Speed and precision, when combined with unified alliances, could dismantle even the most fortified positions. The old logic of deterrence had been shaken. A hardened fortress no longer meant safety. Yet beneath the celebration was unease. Every briefing carried the same warning: escalation remained a risk. The strike had bought time, but it had also lit a fuse. How long before Beijing sought to prove it could respond in kind? For ordinary people, though veterans who remembered Cold War drills, families who grew up under the shadow of nuclear alarms, and younger generations watching live feeds from their phones, the meaning was simpler. America had acted first, and America had shown it still led. As the 15th of July, 2025, faded into history, the world carried a scar that would not be forgotten. 3 Chinese missile bases, once symbols of Beijing's strength, were now craters visible from orbit. In just 14 minutes, the myth of untouchable fortresses had been erased, replaced by the reality that no distance, no border, and no shield could guarantee safety. For Washington, the strike was more than military success. It was a statement of doctrine, that threats would be met before they matured, and that America's hand would not hesitate when its security was on the line. To allies, it was reassurance that the United States still held the mantle of deterrence. To adversaries, it was a reminder that time itself could be turned into a weapon. NATO's unity tightened, Pacific partners doubled down on their defenses, and Beijing faced an uncomfortable truth: its aura of invulnerability had cracked wide open. The operation, called Iron Torch, became more than a battle plan. It became a symbol of the new age of warfare: fast, precise, and merciless. And yet, for millions watching from their living rooms, the deeper lesson resonated beyond geopolitics. Peace isn't preserved by speeches, but by readiness. Security isn't guaranteed by treaties, but by action. Freedom survives because nations still dare to act first when tyranny rises. The legacy of Iron Torch will be remembered not only in steel and flame, but in the choices it forces every nation to make. How far are we willing to go to keep the balance of power? And how quickly can that balance shift when seconds matter? What do you think this strike means for the future of global security? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to stay ahead of the world's biggest turning points, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and join us as we uncover the stories shaping tomorrow. Shaping tomorrow.